Dear students, welcome back to the lesson on Chapter 8 of your history textbook, Women, Caste and Reform. In this episode, we will be studying the reforms that took place in the 18th and 19th centuries in the field of caste system in India. The major objectives of today's lesson are understanding caste as a social practice, prevalence of caste system in India, racial discrimination in South Africa and America, movements and organizations launched to abolish caste inequality in India, the role of social reformers in eradicating caste discrimination, reform movements of Dr. Ambedkar, JYOTIBHA PHULE, Periyar and Gandhiji. After studying today's lesson, you will be able to explain the caste prejudices that were in place in the 18th and 19th centuries, relate the caste discrimination in India with other countries, examine the role of social reformers in their battle against the caste system. Dear students, in the previous episode, you studied the reformations that took place by banning evil practices such as sati and child marriage. You also studied the introduction of education for women and the introduction of widow remarriage. You studied the ideologies of Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. In this episode, we will be further studying the changes that reformed the Indian society. You will be coming across new personalities like JYOTIBHA PHULE, Swami Vivekananda, Periyar and Dr. Ambedkar. Before we begin, what do we mean by the term caste? How did it originate? Have you come across the term caste discrimination? Recall from classes 6 and 7. The division of society into different social categories based on occupation and race is called caste. In Indian history, we refer to caste as varnas. As you studied in class 6, Indian society was divided into 4 varnas: the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas and the Shudras. There were outcasts called Chandalas who were treated as untouchables. The caste system originated in the later Vedic period around 900 BC. The caste system was not rigid back then. With the passage of time, these caste divisions were made rigid and a clear-cut distinction was visible among the status and occupation of people. The upper castes called themselves as pure and termed the lower caste as polluting. The upper castes went on becoming wealthy while the Shudras and untouchables were treated as polluters of the land. They were oppressed and ill-treated by the upper castes. They were assigned the work of cleaning the drains, burying the dead, scavenging animals and much more. One group of untouchables called the Madigas worked with the skin of dead animals and processed them into leather products like shoes and bags. They were termed polluted by the upper castes because they used to work with the skin of dead animals. In places like Bombay, where the colonial government set up schools for education, the lower castes and untouchables were not allowed to enter these schools. Instead, they were asked to sit far away from the upper caste students who would otherwise become polluted. As you studied in class 7, the untouchables had to clap their hands while walking on the road to alarm the upper castes. They were also prohibited from using the public wells and transport. They were not allowed to change their profession from a cobbler to a trader. All these discriminations and bias against the lower castes continued for hundreds of years. But students, always remember, caste exists only in our minds. They were not created by God or nature. They were created by some people for their own interests. Even today, some kind of caste discrimination exists in many parts of the country. But do not associate the caste system as a unique characteristic only to the Indian society. Division of society into different castes existed at some point of time in different countries such as Iran, Yemen, South Africa, Rwanda, Europe, Japan and Korea. All these countries had to fight the evil of caste prejudices. Let us study one such social discrimination, that is of the African Americans. As you studied in chapter 2, the Europeans started to discover new lands and established their rule. They tried to exploit the native resources like they did in India. Another victim of the European conquest was South Africa. From the time Europeans landed in Africa, a trade in slaves began. Black people were captured and brought from Africa to America, sold to white planters and made to work in plantations. In the plantations, they had to work for long hours, typically from dawn to dusk, and they were punished and tortured for inefficient work. Thus, a racial discrimination arose between the blacks of Africa and the white people of Europe and America. This was called the racial discrimination, about which you have studied in your social and political life classes. A big battle had to be fought both in Africa and America to eradicate this racial discrimination. In the 1950s in America, the civil rights movement was launched against racial discrimination led by Martin Luther King Jr. In South Africa, the racial discrimination came to an end with the anti-apartheid movement, which ended in the 1990s led by Nelson Mandela. Many other countries framed laws later on prohibiting all forms of discrimination in their societies. Similarly, in India, after independence, when the constitution was framed and adopted, all kinds of discriminations were prohibited. All people were to be treated equally. Article 15 of the Indian Constitution prohibits discrimination based on race, caste and religion, while Article 17 of the Indian Constitution terms the practice of untouchability as illegal. You have studied this in your social and political life classes. But what was the situation before independence under the British rule? You have studied in the previous episode about Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Were there anyone like them who stood against caste discrimination? What were their reforms? Let us explore as we study further. During the colonial rule, there was intense migration of people from villages to towns. This was because the cities were offering new jobs such as construction of buildings and roads, which required coolies, diggers, sewage cleaners, construction workers, etc. Thus, people from villages, especially the lower castes and untouchables, moved from their villages to these towns in search of new jobs. Some of them also went to work in plantations in Assam, Mauritius, Trinidad and Indonesia. Working in new places was always hard, but the lower castes and untouchables saw this as an opportunity to get rid of the upper caste domination. This migration from villages to elsewhere gave them the freedom from their social identities. Also, with the modernism in cities, these people got themselves educated and sometimes converted to Christianity. Christian missionaries began setting up schools for tribal children and lower caste children. These schools thus provided education to the lower castes and untouchables. Thus, these changes took place naturally in the society that provided a stage for reformation to take place from within. However, reforms of learned men and scholars was necessary to change the perspective of the society. Therefore, the following were the reasons for the rise of caste reforms and movements in India. Migration of lower castes from villages to towns and overseas provided them the freedom of expression. Education among lower castes and tribes made them realize their rights and raise voice against inequalities. Modernized thoughts of Indian scholars provided the base for the need of reforms. The humanitarian measures taken by the British in civilizing Indian society acted as support to the local voices. Many organizations were set up for this purpose and movements began to rise against the social oppression by the upper castes. Interestingly, many of these organizations and movements were launched and propagated by learned men of the upper caste themselves. Some of these organizations and movements were: the Brahmo Samaj was founded in 1830 at Bengal by Raja Ram Mohan Roy. It prohibited all forms of sacrifice and believed in the Upanishads. It forbade its members from criticizing other religious practices. The Prarthana Samaj was formed in 1867 at Bombay by Atmaram Panduranga. This organization sought to remove all caste restrictions and adhered to the tradition of bhakti, and it believed in the spiritual unity of all castes. The Paramahamsa Mandali was founded at 1840 in Bombay by Dadobhai Panduranga, which was formed to work for abolition of caste. The Satnami movement was founded in central India in 1820 by Ghasidas, who worked among the leather workers and organized a movement to improve their social status. The Satyashodak Samaj was founded in 1873 in Pune by JYOTIBHA PHULE with a mission of education and increased social rights for Shudras and Dalits in Maharashtra. The Self-Respect movement was founded in 1925 in Tamil Nadu by Periyar E.V. Ramaswamy, who believed that untouchables were the true upholders of the original Tamil culture, which was subjugated by the Brahmins. The Ramakrishna Mission was founded in 1897 in Bengal by Swami Vivekananda. It was named after Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Swami Vivekananda's guru. It stressed the ideal of salvation through social service and selfless action. Today, the Ramakrishna Mission functions at a worldwide scale. The Veda Samaj was founded in 1864 at Madras by Kesab Chandra Sen. It worked to abolish caste distinctions and promoted widow remarriage and women education. Apart from these institutions and organizations, there were some individual men who worked day and night to eliminate caste distinctions. Let us now study about the reforms of such men. Throughout Indian history, there were many rulers who attempted to eliminate caste divisions through their ideologies. Ashoka the Great of the Mauryas, Raja Krishnadeva of the Vijayanagar Empire, and the Mughal legend Akbar were some of these rulers who tried to change the perspective of the society during their times. What were their views on caste divisions in the society? What reforms did they take to eliminate these divisions? Recall from classes 6 and 7. During colonial rule, the task of eliminating caste distinctions was taken up by many learned men. You would have surely heard about one such person, Dr. BHIMRAO AMBEDKAR. You have studied about him in classes 6 and 7. Dr. BHIMRAO AMBEDKAR is considered the father of Indian Constitution and is also the best known leader of the Dalits. Dr. Ambedkar fought for the rights of the Dalit community. He was born into the Mahar caste, which was considered untouchable. He lived in spaces outside the main village and was not allowed to enter the village. Dr. Ambedkar was the first person in his caste who completed education and went on to England to become a lawyer. He urged Dalits to send their children to schools and educate them. He also urged them to search for government jobs to come out of the caste prejudices. He led many efforts of the Dalits to gain entry into the temples. Dr. Ambedkar believed that the Dalits had to fight the caste system and work on a society based on respect, not for just a few people but for all persons. Another prominent personality in this field was JYOTIBHA PHULE. He presented strong arguments about the origin of Aryans. Have you heard of this term? Yes, you have. You have studied about the Aryans in class 6. Jyotiba Phule argued that the Aryans were foreigners who came from outside and conquered the true children of the country who were living here even before the Aryans came. He said that the Aryans established themselves as the upper castes and termed the local people as lower castes. According to him, the upper castes have no right on their land and power. In reality, this belongs to the indigenous people who were in fact the lower castes. In 1873, Jyotiba Phule wrote a book called Gulamgiri. This book was dedicated to the American Civil War. The American Civil War was fought in North America in the years 1861 to 1865 against the former slaves of the American colony and the American government. He dedicated this book to all those Americans who had fought to free the slaves in America, thus establishing a link between the lower castes in India and the slaves of America. There were other reformers who worked for social changes in their regions. For example, in eastern Bengal, Haridas Thakur's Matua sect worked for the cultivators. Haridas questioned the Brahmanical texts that supported the caste system. In Kerala, a guru from the Elava caste, Sri Narayana Guru, proclaimed the ideals of unity among all people. He argued against treating people unequally based on caste divisions. Similarly, in Tamil Nadu, the battle was led by E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar or Periyar. He came from a middle class family. He had been an ascetic in his early life and had studied the Sanskrit scriptures carefully. He believed that the Dalits and lower castes had to fight for their own dignity. He felt that all religious authorities saw social divisions and inequality as God-given. Thus, the lower castes and untouchables had to free themselves from all religions in order to get equality. After learning about all these reforms and reformers, you may ask, wasn't there any opposition from the public, especially the upper castes? Were all these movements successful? Yes, there was stiff opposition by the upper castes to these social reformations. The orthodox upper castes reacted by founding the Sanatan Dharma Sabhas, Brahman Sabha and the Bharat Dharma Mahamandal. The aim of these associations was to uphold caste divisions in Hinduism and to show how they were sanctified by scriptures. Debates and struggles over caste continued beyond the colonial period and are going on even in our times. But a significant development in eradication of caste discrimination came with Mahatma Gandhiji. You will be studying about his ideologies and freedom struggle in the next chapter. During the freedom struggle, Gandhiji observed that there was high level of inequality and bias among the people. Unless this bias had been eliminated, the Indians could never come together as a whole and defeat the British. Thus, to establish equality, Gandhiji himself started doing the jobs that were meant for the Dalits and untouchables. He started cleaning the drains, toilets, etc. Dear students, now you have understood the reasons behind the rise of caste reforms and the efforts taken by different reformers in the field of eradicating caste distinctions. As an active member of the society, it is the duty of all of us to take steps to eliminate caste distinctions in the society. As a teacher, I would make sincere efforts to educate and spread awareness wherever I witnessed caste discriminations. I would also ensure that the laws and rights written in the Constitution of India are made aware to the public. What would you do as a student to eliminate these caste divisions? Think about it. Dear students, that brings us to the end of this chapter. Let us revise what we have learnt in today's lesson. The division of society into different social categories based on occupation and race is called caste. The caste system originated in the later Vedic period around 900 BC. The lower castes and untouchables were assigned the work of cleaning the drains, burying the dead, scavenging animals, etc. Many organizations were set up and movements were begun against the caste oppression by upper castes. Some of these organizations and movements were the Brahma Samaj and Ramakrishna Mission in eastern India, the Prarthana Samaj, the Paramahamsa Mandali, and the Satyashodak Samaj in western India, the Sattami movement in central India, the Self-Respect movement and Veda Samaj in South India. Reformers like Dr. BHIMRAO Ambedkar, JYOTIBHA PHULE, Sri Narayana Guru, Periyar, Swami Vivekananda and Gandhiji fought against caste discrimination in the society. There was stiff opposition by the upper caste to these social reformations. They founded the Sanatan Dharma Sabhas and the Bharat Dharma Mahamandal. Let us do. Read the text about Swami Vivekananda given on page 106 of your textbook and write a note about his thoughts and ideologies. Also make a special mention about the views held by Europeans about Swami Vivekananda and submit it to your teacher. Activity. Suppose you come across a family who is practicing caste discrimination towards their maid servant. How would you make them realize their mistake and change their thoughts towards the concept of caste? Discuss with your friends. Dear students, I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. In the next chapter, you will be studying about the freedom struggle of India. You will be studying about the efforts of different freedom fighters such as Dadabhai Naoroji, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, and finally the Satyagraha of Mahatma Gandhiji. Thank you.